Hello, welcome back to the Bookstack Coffee Chat. It is Thursday again. Yet another week has rolled by. I hope that it has been a wonderful one for you and that you have been able to get some reading in. Let me know in the comments what you are currently reading or what you read last week. I'm always looking to add to my TBR list. So today, for this episode, I thought I would reflect a little bit on some short stories and essays about the slice of life, right? Those little daily activities that we do and that some people write about. And it can be entertaining, it can be heartbreaking. I have a little bit of both that I'm going to share with you today. And so let's get started. So the first one that I want to talk about is by an author many of you are familiar with, A.A. Milne, with Winnie the Pooh fame. But this one is written not for children. It's not anything that you shouldn't read. It's just that it's written for adults. And it is a story that deals with words and word play. And if any of you are like me and love the play Scrabble and word games, puzzles, that kind of thing, this story is right up your alley. So it is a story that deals with anagrams, which is the when you take one word and rearrange it into different words. And the story is about the gentleman who has heard about this one word and has been supposedly you can't make any other words with it. And so he lays awake at night trying to make new words. And it's just a parody. It's funny and just a short read and something that I enjoyed and thought that you might be as well. And if you like words and word plays on words, you might also appreciate the article. And I'll put all these links to these stories and resources for you in the comments. But if you're curious about other word type games, there was a feature article in theweek.com a few years back, but it's still a very relevant article and explains palindromes, anagrams, and 9 other names for alphabetical antics. So I thought that was a good read as well. The next short story that I read this week and wanted to share with you was by another author many of you are familiar with, which is Mark Twain. And the title of this short story is A Telephonic Conversation. And this one is really entertaining because it is all about the old party line. So many of us, myself included, too young to remember the party line, which is where you had to pick up the receiver of a phone mounted in the wall and talk to an operator and ask to be connected to whomever it was that you wanted to talk to. You didn't have just a phone number that you dialed or pushed a button. You had to ask for an operator to connect you. So that was a party line. And of course, they almost always listened in, the operators, right? So it's a reflection on the party line as well as how difficult it is for some people to say goodbye and end a conversation. It really is quite humorous, and it's a very quick read. So if you haven't read it before, I encourage you to do so. Like I said, I'll put a link to the story in the comments. The next short story that I discovered, had never read before, is The Awful Fate of Melpomenus Jones. Not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly at all. But it is by Stephen Leacock. Might be mispronouncing his name as well. And this one is a parody, not quite as funny because he takes it to an extreme at the end. But it is kind of relatable. At least it was for me. Maybe it won't be for you. But it was all about the reflection on the difficulty of taking your leave. Like when you're visiting someone or, come across someone in the store or something and trying to take your leave. In this particular instance, he is a guest in someone's house and the quandary he finds himself in when he's trying to leave, and all about trying to be mannerly and, do the right thing as far as social customs are concerned and so forth. And also it shares the host's concern about manners as well. And it's very entertaining until the end, which is kind of a interesting ending. I'll just leave it at that. I'll leave you hanging so you read it as well. The next short story I came across was I Stand Here Ironing by Tilly Olson. This one I pulled instead of online. The other ones I found online. So this one I won't have a link for. But this harkens back to my college days and my English lit classes. And look at this thing. American literature, right? Yeah. I didn't have to read all of it in my classes, but read a fair amount of it. And I still have it, right? When you pay that much money for a textbook, you keep it, right? But this book was all the way tucked in the back. And it was one I had not read, at least I don't remember reading it, when I was in college. And as a mother now of 2 children, it really struck home with me. This story did. The other stories were, witty and humorous and addressed those, little foibles that we Americans at least often experience. This short story looks back on the real regrets that many of us mothers feel when we look back on especially the firstborn child, of how we parented in their formative years, right? And there's always a lot of, wish I had done things differently, a little bit of regret. And it also shares a lot of the good moments too, right? But it's an honest reflection of parenthood and motherhood, and especially during difficult and challenging times. So that was a good read that I wanted to share with you as well. And then it all comes back, right, to, we read about, we can make fun of some things that we do, and we can regret some things that we do in our life. But how are we supposed to know what to do, right? How are we really supposed to know is when we follow social customs and manners and, interactions with our family members and friends. How are we supposed to live? Well, the good news is that there's a book for that, right? And it is called, you guessed it, the Bible. And there are so many wonderful promises in here and instructions and guidelines for all of us on how to live. And I wanted to share a few of them in relation to the stories that I shared. When we aren't sure how to live and what do, we can always go back to the 2 greatest commandments in the New Testament, right? Which is to love God with all your heart and to love others, right? Treat others as you would yourself. And so let's go to Mark chapter 12, verses 30 and 31, which says, this is Jesus speaking here, "And you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. This is the first commandment. And the second like it is this, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. There is no other commandment greater than these." And so those should rule our lives, right? And all of our daily interactions. The next one that helps us is 1 Peter 3, verses 8 through 9. And that says, "Finally, all of you be of one mind, having compassion for one another. Love as brothers, be tender-hearted, be courteous, not returning evil for evil or reviling for reviling, but on the contrary, blessing, knowing that you were called to this, that you may inherit a blessing." And Matthew 5:44 reminds us that, let me get to the right one. Matthew 5:44. "But I say to you, love your enemies." Well, that can be a hard one, right? But love your enemies, bless those who curse you, do good to those who hate you, and pray for those who spitefully use you and persecute you. And the Bible is saying, life isn't always going to be roses and, gumdrops and roses, whatever that phrase is, right? It's not always going to be fun and games and humorous and lighthearted. There are going to be difficult times, and there are going to be times of regret. And there are going to be the times that we're persecuted, right? But we're to love our enemies. In talking about guilt and regret, if you've read this short story by Tilly Olson and you can relate to it and, feel a little bit of regret about how you may have parented in the past, we can always look to 2 Chronicles 30, verse 9. For if you return to the Lord your brethren, and your children will be treated with compassion by those who lead them captive, so that they may come back to this land. For the Lord your God is gracious and merciful, and will not turn his face from you if you return to him. And then I will close with 1 John 1:9, which says, if we confess our sins, he is faithful and just to forgive us our sins and to cleanse us from all unrighteousness. So we don't have to cling to all that regret. We can give it all to God, and he will cleanse us from all of that unrighteousness. What amazing hope, right? Our God is so good. So today I want to just leave you with a couple of thoughts. First of all, what are some of your favorite short stories that you've read and some of the essays that you've read? Some great publications put out short stories all the time. Reader's Digest being one of them, right? So share in the comments. What are some of your favorite short stories that you've just discovered or that maybe you read a long time ago back in your college days, right? I'd love to hear about them. And also, what are some of those short stories and life experiences that you can share about your own personal life? Have you ever done that? I'm guessing that you've, talked about some of them and shared them orally, but have you ever written any of them down? If not, I highly encourage you to do so. Your children, grandchildren, friends, and family will thoroughly appreciate it. I guarantee it. And to help you to do that, I created a book of weekly writing prompts, the 1-year collection of weekly writing prompts right here. And you can get that on my website at dailyandbickle.com. Let me just put that there. But, it just asks about those little slice of life events. And, how did you meet the love of your life? What have your children taught you? What have been your greatest lessons in humility? These are just a few of the questions that are in the book. And with each question, I also share a little personal example, explain it a little bit more. And also there are areas for you to write your answers and jot those down. So holidays are coming up. This would make a perfect gift, for you to complete. Just a few questions a week, even just one question a week. And by the end of the year, you have your life story to give to people. And if you aren't interested in it for yourself, but I highly encourage you to write your stories, this makes a great Christmas gift for parents and grandparents and other loved ones. Again, that's available on my website. And with that, it concludes another Bookstack Coffee Chat. Thank you so much for joining me. I so appreciate you watching live and on the replay. I look forward to chatting with you in the comments. I always review them. And I look forward to being with you again next week, which, as you know, can you believe it? It's going to be Thanksgiving. And if all goes as planned, I will have been prepared with my bird and all of that other stuff so that I can come with you live again next week with what I have been reading. So with that, thank you again. Have a blessed week. Take care.